5. Subject last seen entering the forest on foot, brandishing a large kitchen knife and whistling "God Save the Queen." Please exercise caution.
Copy that, HQ. This is Officer Random entering the forest, pursuing on foot. You, stop! Hold it right there! You're whistling "God Save the Queen."
Hey, haven't you been keeping up with current events, man? It's "God Save the King" now.
Right, okay, you're free to go.
Pigs, man. Hello and welcome to Random Movie Time. Today's feature is the 2014 Nigerian crime drama October 1st, directed by Kunle Afolayan and starring Sadiq, Daba, Kayode, Olaiya, and David Bailie. So this tells the story of a series of horrific murders which occur in Nigeria just days before they declare independence on the 1st of October 1960. And they bring in a famous detective from another part of the country to solve the crimes, but he finds many roadblocks in the way, such as the British government and even his fellow Nigerian police officers, who all seem to want a quick resolution rather than actual justice. Well, what did you think of this movie, Shannon?
There were a lot of great things about this movie. I thought there was some amazing film work. It was really lush. The colors were beautiful. It takes place in 1960, so I love the retro feel of it. The opening scene is particularly eye-catching. It really brings you into the movie. It grabs you right away. So the first scene is a really well executed scene of the rapist and murderer chasing after one of his victims in the forest. And you can tell that it's from a separate time frame from the coloration. That he uses a bit of red coloration in the scene, so you know that it's from a different time than what the other bits of the film are going to be. And he does use a bit of that red coloring for a lot of the murder rape scenes too, so that's quite good. So the inspector, who is the main character, occasionally he starts off as a bit of a hard ass, but he kind of reminds me of Columbo in some scenes. The way he questions some people, you know. He is in this position where October 1st is when the British gave Nigeria their independence. And so this inspector worked under the British government. And so he's in a position where when he gets sent to the south of Nigeria to do these investigations, they view him as an outsider, and they're not as willing to accept him and help him at first, because at this point Nigeria was still a little bit more of a, I'm not sure about now, but back then it was really divided, very tribal society. They kept calling him Northerner. He didn't understand their language, and he was also Muslim, where a lot of the other characters were Christian. And so that put another spin on things. The political landscape is a bit complicated, but that is the backdrop to the story. There are a few time jumps. It starts out with the inspector, after the initial scene, of course. It starts out with the inspector talking to the British authorities. He goes to them to tell them that there's a serial rapist and murderer, and he sits down and he starts relating the story. So really it's about him relating the story to the British authorities, and most of the film is a flashback to that. And that's one part I find a bit problematic, because the only time, I mean, there are a couple of times where they go back to him telling the story to the British authorities, but even though it is important to establish what's going on politically in Nigeria, because it does have some bearing on the story, I don't think it was necessary to have those British officers. I think they could have told the story because I don't think those British officers really added much value to the story, other than them just being there and obviously biased and prejudiced against the colonists, or the people who live in their colony. So I mean, there's some that they do show some animosities, especially one British officer in particular shows quite a bit of animosity to the inspector. But if they were going to use that angle, I think it could have been more integrated into the story, because honestly I forgot about them. Like, I'm just watching the film, and then all of a sudden at the end of the film there they are again, and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot. He's talking to the British officer. So they don't really play a big part in it. So I think that the story would have been fine on its own without having them there. But other than that, I mean, the acting was pretty cool, and it was really interesting to learn about some of the history of Nigeria and the tribal society. And I did a bit of research, and it turns out that this story is loosely based on a true story, although mostly the filmmaker kind of made up the story. He admits that he had heard something about the story, and it influenced his story, but it's not based on that story. So that was very interesting. And one other thing I found a bit strange was occasionally there was some exposition, like they were explaining to the inspector how, oh well, you know, the women in our village are expected to be virgins before they get married and stuff like this, you know, things that to me, I don't know, I thought they would be obvious to the inspector. I mean, in that culture, maybe it's different. Maybe it was different with the Muslims and the people in the north of Nigeria, but it seemed like something that would be something he would know about. But maybe I'm just, I don't know, maybe not. But I felt that there were a couple of times where the exposition was unnecessary, or they could have done it in a different way. Like maybe if the inspector was thinking out loud, oh, well, they are expected to be virgins or something, you know, I don't know. It just seemed strange that they would, like, you know, educate the inspector about these things that seem obvious. So I think that that was the thing. But other than that, wow, so beautifully shot, beautiful colors, beautiful scenery. The actors were quite good, yeah. And I was very impressed. It's a beautiful film. And what a horrific story. So, Tommy, what do you have to say?
Oh, I thought it was very good. I actually think some of that exposition and, you know, having the British officers there and stuff, I think that might have been to help appeal to an international market. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I think the fact that the British were leaving, that was a very big part of the story. So, I mean, it is called October 1st after all. And so I think they were really trying to show that they were yet another roadblock in his way. And because of them, he couldn't even really close the case at the end. They just sort of told him to go away because they didn't want this to overshadow, everything that they had accomplished in Nigeria. So yeah, I kind of disagree about that, but I would say I think the movie has just a couple of little flaws. One was it was maybe a little bit too long, and the other thing was the sound was quite bad in some parts. It almost seemed like it almost seemed like they were working with maybe two microphones, and they sometimes were using the bad microphone. But the funny thing was that the bad sound tended to come in the indoor scenes, and you'd think they'd have more control over the sound during the indoor scenes. But all of the outdoor scenes, the sound was pretty good. So I'm not quite sure what happened there. But this was just a nitpick, because for most of the movie, the sound is fine. Yeah, you can tell that there's a lot of talent in Nigeria in the film industry there. I thought this movie looked and felt like pretty epic. I mean, it was done really on an epic scale with many extras and lots of locations. So it was a good film. It was a tense film, For some reason, I think we watched it on Netflix. And Netflix, or whatever provider
I think so.
Yeah, whatever provider it was, they put it under the horror category for some reason. And it's really not a horror movie at all. I mean, some horrific things happen, but you wouldn't call it a horror movie. This is a straight up crime thriller. And as far as these things go, the Hollywood ones, anyway, I mean, the violence is relatively tame in this movie, but there's still, violence and things like that happen. So, but yeah, it's a crime thriller, and it's quite a good one. One thing that I thought was weird was that the police officers in 1960, according to this movie anyway, in Nigeria, they were still using ancient flintlock pistols, which, if that's true, that must be the most modern usage of flintlocks in an official capacity, all the way to the 1960s.
Yeah.
You'd think, being a British colony, the British could have supplied them with some old surplus service revolvers, from World War II, or at least from World War I, because they made so many of the damn things. But no, single shot flintlock pistols. But they were cool looking anyway. I thought the characters were really good, especially Sadiq Daba as the inspector. He had a lot of charisma. And some nice subtle performances from the whole cast. Beautiful movie. Very well done. I'd highly recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, I'm to your point about the British officers. I wasn't saying that my point was that it was necessary as part of the story to have something about that, the British handing over Nigeria to the Nigerians. It was important to have that British influence there, but I thought it was clunky the way they did it. I think that it could have been done in a better way, maybe have the British officers more involved, or do it in a different way, because I thought, like I say, I forgot they were there. Like they did until the end of the movie. So I didn't think that they had much presence, and I think that and what you're saying, I agree with, that it's necessary to have for people to understand the British influence, and but I think that it could have been more I think it could just been better handled. And the sound, on a couple occasions, it was very staticky, but it wasn't too often. It was occasional. It was maybe 3 times or something throughout the film. But yeah, I agree with you on that too.
All right, so how many flintlock pistols would you give this one?
I'll give this one 3.5. I thought it was a beautiful movie. There were a couple of things that knocked it down for me, like the sound quality occasionally. I thought again, the British influence thing, I thought they could have done it better. But I mean, the acting was really amazing. Like you say, Sadiq Daba was very charismatic. And wow, we can't get over that beautiful cinematography, the beautiful lush colors, and how it set the mood, and the way they colorized the attack scenes. It was really, really amazing. So, but because of the couple of those little things, I thought it knocked it down a bit. So 3.5 for me. What about you, Tommy?
I'll give it 4 flintlock pistols out of 5. I thought it was very good. As I said, it was just like maybe a little bit too long and some problems with the sound. But other than that, really, really good.
Yeah, I think everybody should see it. I really do.
Yeah. Now, there's some weirdo whistling over there, so we'd better go see what that's about. But until next time, we'll see you on Random Movie Time.